The Christian faith is a journey. We're all moving and learning at a different pace, sometimes with detours along the way. But there are many in our midst who are stuck, wrestling with questions, digging for truth. Maybe it's you, a friend, or someone you love, taking things apart to see what's really inside, letting go of the things that once felt dear, feeling alone on the search for answers. Don't settle for deconstruction. In the midst of your questions, doubts, fears, there's a firm foundation, and you can build your life on it.
Good morning. My name is Michael Larson. I'm a volunteer here at the Well. And first service, I said I graduated from college a few years ago, and that was intended to be a joke, but apparently I didn't wait the beat. So I graduated from college a few years ago from Taylor University. Anybody know Taylor University? If you don't, it's on ESPN almost every single year for Silent Night, one of the great basketball traditions in all of college basketball. But I graduated from Taylor, but I almost didn't graduate from Taylor, and it's not what you'd think. I got good grades, but I came home after the first semester of my freshman year, and I told my parents, I don't know if I can go back. I wasn't fitting in. I lived on First East Wingett's Hall, and it was affectionately known as Nerd East. Now, some of you out there are like, Michael, it's perfect for you. You fit right in. And I get it, and yes, you are right, but I wasn't that kind of nerd. It was a lot of video gamers, computers, computer programmers, and I just didn't fit in. So I went home Christmas break, and I was like, Mom and Dad, I don't think I can do this. They said, you know what, go back for 1 month. So January was kind of its own term called J-term. And so I said, fine, we'll do that. I'll come back second semester. We'll see what happens. So went back to J-term, went back to Taylor, and met a guy at the very end of the hall, last room at the end of the hall, and we just clicked. He was very much like me and kind of became a friend, and then we had that class together, and I felt like, you know what, if there's one, maybe there are more. Maybe I can find that community that I was just so desperate for going into college. And sure enough, I went back that second semester, and I met who is now my best friend. And I also met Whitney, my wife, in that second semester. And I found this incredible Christian community because I decided to go back. And last week we talked about this community feeling like that, feeling like family, kind of that similar experience that what I experienced at Taylor in the second semester of my freshman year. But something also happened when I joined that group, and it's something that I hope happens to us here in this community, is that we change. Our lives begin to look different. We think differently. We act differently because of the community, because of God impacting us through each other. So this week, we're talking about what happens in this community. In order to continue to be a place where broken find healing and lost find purpose and lonely find family. What do we do? How do we look? How do we act? Who are we becoming? And how are we changing? Now, some of us here today, maybe you're just exploring faith. Maybe your spouse or your kids or your parents made you come today. Whatever it is, we are just glad that you're here. But for others of us, faith has been a part of our lives, had a place in our lives for a long time. We would call ourselves Christians. But today, I kind of want to chat through what that even means, because sometimes we can toss around words and ideas and assume we all know and we're on the same page. In fact, I think much of the world isn't sure what we mean when we say Christian. And I think many of us maybe would even have some differing opinions. There have been a lot of additions tacked onto that name Christian over the years, some from history or politics, some from inaccuracies or assumptions or just personal experiences or opinions that we have. And some of those additions are good, some of those additions are bad, and some are based on the complete and utter failures by those of us who profess Christianity. And because of those failures, those inconsistencies, the hypocrisy that's absolutely inevitable in any human organization, there's been a significant movement towards people kind of stepping away from and deconstructing faith. Church attendance has dropped dramatically over the last several decades, and if it continues, the church as we know it, as it has been known, will not look anything like what it has. And honestly, in many ways, checking under the hood of our faith, it's a good thing. That's actually exactly what I did during my experience at Taylor. It made my faith my own, and that was a good thing. But we can't just disassemble things. We can't just deconstruct. We've got to do something with those pieces. We've got to put it back together and reconstruct it in a way that helps us to move forward. And that's what this series is all about. That's what today is all about. We're looking at some difficult things. Some things that may have even become a part of our faith and Christianity that never really belonged. They weren't of Jesus. They aren't found in Scripture. Things that are and were and continue to be failures in the church or Christianity as a whole. Last week, again, we kind of talked about that idea of being a place that looks like a family. But in order to look like that family, we as individuals need to look like that. And as much as there have been failures within these communities, these failures, they naturally are us as individuals failing, not living out what Christ intended. And I think we're admitting that. I think we can all admit that has happened. But I want to spend some time on the other side of that admission, that confession, because I'm not sure if we're even clear as to what we should actually look like. So first things first, we claim to be Christians. I'm going to be the one that asks the dumb question. What's a Christian? If we're claiming that that's who we are, what does a Christian look like and act like and talk like and live like? It sort of reminds me about that phrase from Princess Bride, right? I do not think that word means what you think it means. Now, I'm not one for making up new definitions to words just kind of for the sake of it. Language is important. That would be a careless thing. But it is funny because people do this. I don't know if you've heard this before, but recently there was a change in the dictionary. The word literally can now mean both in a literal manner or used to express strong feeling while not being literally true. So literally can literally mean both literally and not literally. So needless to say, I'm a little bit cautious about going out there in the world or in the dictionary and saying, well, this is what Christianity means. This is how it's defined. So let's look in Scripture. Feels like a really good place to start. We're going to look in the book of Acts. Acts is all about that first church, the early church. And in chapter 11, verse 26, it says this. So for a whole year, Barnabas and Saul, church leaders, met with the church and taught great numbers of people. The disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. And that's a location. So before Antioch, before this time in the life of the church, the people who followed Jesus, they weren't yet called Christians. They were followers of the way, or in this verse, they were simply called disciples. So that's sort of helpful, but we're kind of just defining one word with another, swapping it out. So what is a disciple? Well, we can know what a disciple is by looking at the crew of people that followed Jesus around during his few years of ministry. Who were these people? We can see some examples in the first introduction to some of these disciples in Matthew 4. Starting in verse 18, one day, as Jesus was walking along the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, also called Peter, and Andrew, throwing a net into the water, for they fished for a living. Jesus called out to them, "Come follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once and followed him. A little farther up the shore, he saw two other brothers, James and John, sitting in a boat with their father Zebedee, repairing their nets, and he called them to come too. They immediately followed him, leaving the boat and their father behind. So Jesus was walking through Galilee, and it's kind of a remote part of the country. The people there were a little bit less cultivated, a little bit less educated, maybe a little rough around the edges. And these guys that he was calling, they would have been that way, just poor fishermen. They were hard workers, but they weren't necessarily the educated or the wealthy or the well-known. And sometimes we can go through and elevate the people of the Bible, right? Like we may not feel up to the task because they were in the Bible and we obviously aren't. But we're wrong. These guys were normal guys living normal lives, doing normal things. And actually, it's even worse than that. We think that we are failing in life at times. Take a look at this list by those closest to Jesus. First, Judas. We know Judas. He betrayed Christ. Thomas doubted that the resurrected Christ was even real. Peter cut off a guy's ear and denied that he even knew Christ. The entire group of them On the very last night before Christ was crucified, at dinner, they were arguing about who was greatest. They just spent years with Jesus, and that's what they were spending the last few moments doing. They all fell asleep when Jesus asked them to keep watch while he prayed. At his arrest, they all deserted him so urgently that one guy ran off naked. Literally. Most of them deserted him at his death. Those were the disciples. Those were the guys that he recruited, that he chose, and who followed him. Not perfect by any stretch. I think we can relate. And yet the greatest movement of all time, of all history, started with that little ragtag bunch. We've got no excuses. We see what God did through them. What can he do through us? But we're something else too, because the disciples were apprentices. We as disciples are apprentices. Now in Greek, that word disciple meant a few things. It meant student or pupil or apprentice. But the term in the times of Jesus, it would have meant something different than what we kind of think about today. The normal pattern of that day and age was that a Jewish boy would actually kind of study under someone that was doing whatever vocation that child would eventually do. So it would happen in a wide variety of jobs. And it wasn't like we do today, where maybe if something breaks around the house, you go on YouTube and you're like, oh yeah, I've followed this guy a couple of times. I think he knows what he's doing. Or maybe you're looking for a recipe and you're like, oh, I know that social media person, he or she posts some great recipes. I'm going to check that out. It wasn't like that. It was this idea of being totally committed to a person, a teacher, a leader with your entire life. It would have been this integrated, holistic process that you're constantly doing. The apprentice would walk with the master, not just to achieve the skill or become excellent at that, but really to discover a way of life. It was a shoulder-to-shoulder, living life together type experience. And eventually that apprentice would become a teacher, mastering that vocation. A couple of months, 6 months ago or so, I started doing some executive coaching. I stepped out of paid ministry here at the Well and have stepped into doing some executive coaching and some team and cultural health work. And a few years back, I wouldn't have had much to say to these folks. It would have been a very short call. But over the last 9 years, I have walked with Pastor Jerry. And I've gotten the leadership from him. Those things have become a part of me. I've walked closely to see how he did relationships, how he was a dad and a husband and a friend and a leader and a pastor. I've heard the things that he said. Those things have become a part of me because I've walked closely for long enough to absorb those things. And that's what Jesus was calling these disciples to. That's what he's calling us to do today, to walk with him in that way. Take kind of a personal assessment. Is that how you're walking with Jesus, like an apprentice would? So if we're tracking here, a Christian is a disciple, and a disciple is an apprentice. An apprentice is learning. So what are we learning when we follow Jesus? Well, John writes about Jesus defining a disciple this way. He says, when you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. So as apprentices, we are learning to produce the fruit of Jesus. A couple of years ago, Whitney bought me a lemon tree. I've talked about it before. It comes in handy for some good sermon illustrations. And she bought me this lemon tree, and I put it in the corner of our living room, and I was really proud of it. I was so excited. Even if I was going to get a couple of lemons off this thing, I was going to have the best shot glass of lemonade ever grown right here in the Chicagoland. I was so excited about it. And it never happened. It was a lemon tree, but it didn't act like a lemon tree. It gave me nothing, and then it died. And I just kind of left it in the corner there. I didn't want to admit my failure, that it didn't do what it was supposed to do. For us to be a disciple, for us to claim that we are Christians, that we're following Jesus, there's this external evidence of something happening internally. A lemon tree producing lemons, true disciples producing fruit. In fact, much fruit. So what is that? What does it look like? What's the fruit supposed to look like in our lives? What values should we be living out in order to become that family that we talked about last week? Paul says this. He writes a letter to the church in the town of Galatia. He says, but the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Sometimes I think we can be a little bit vague in what a Christian is supposed to be like. We talk about patterns, kind of stuff we do. We come to service. We go to small group. We have a Bible on our end table, and sometimes we read it. We put a bumper sticker on the back of our car, and all of those things are good. But this list, that's who we are becoming. It's this everyday pattern of real fruit, of deep change that happens in our lives. So are we constantly becoming these things? More loving? Think about yourself. More peaceful? More patient or kind or good? Would you consider yourself more faithful? Are you more gentle with your kids or those who work for you? Are you more self-controlled in the way that you run your lives? Is that what's happening in us when we apprentice under Christ? Because that fruit, that looks very unlike the rest of the world, doesn't it? It's so uncommon today. And it doesn't just happen, because becoming a disciple of Christ takes time and effort. In fact, it's a practice. I had to get a filling in one of my teeth last week. I had been putting it off for a long time. I hadn't been to the dentist in a long time. I know, shame on me. And I really didn't want to go. And I think part of it is because they call, like medical field, they call it a practice, which feels kind of wrong, that they're just like, we're okay with them just kind of practicing on my mouth. So I put it off for a while, but I also kind of thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I kind of like that. I like this idea of constant learning. In fact, my dentist had just spent 3 days in Chicago training, retraining, relearning some techniques, knowing that he still needed to hone his craft. He was practicing. And there's something kind of baked in, this evolving admission of imperfection in the way that they refer to themselves. It's not stagnant. And I wonder if we were to call our church that same kind of thing. Like, come to the practice at the well. We're not always getting it right, but we're trying. We're evolving. We're admitting our imperfections. It's not perfect, but we're not stagnant. We're moving. And I think there's something really important there. Because sometimes I think that, well, in order for me to be a valid representation of Christ, I have to have it all nailed. I've got to have everything perfect. And yet we hear repeated stories about how Jesus' disciples, they still didn't get it. They were immersed in his life. They walked with him every single day. They watched his every step, saw every miracle, heard every sermon, and yet still they were constantly getting it wrong, constantly needing to be corrected. And we see Paul talking about this idea, faith as a practice. He's writing again another letter to a church in the town of Philippi. He says, keep putting into practice all you learned and received from me. Everything you heard from me and saw me doing, then the God of peace will be with you. So we can't say that we have this goal of this perfect carrying out of this list of rules or regulations, because I promise you we will fail before we leave this building today. But we can say that we're putting it into practice, what we're learning, what we're receiving. And I love that, because Paul points to what we're talking about today, that idea of apprenticeship. He says, things you heard from me and saw me doing. And as individuals, we should view our faith that way, like this working out. We are both now and not yet. We are, and we are becoming something different, something fuller, something more like Jesus. Whitney and I have a 7-year-old. Her name is Rosie, and she is a gymnast. She is not Simone Biles, okay? She's not. But if you walk up to Rosie and you say, are you a gymnast? She said, you better believe it. She is becoming something. She's not the pinnacle of the sport, but she still would call herself a gymnast. And you are a disciple in that way. We together, we're practicing. The way we think about that question, are you a Christian? It should imply this evolution, this constant state of growth, not perfection, not a decision with an endpoint. I'm a Christian on this moment and then it's all done. But the beginning of a journey. We understand that practice, that is the state of constant growth and evolution. Why is it any different as we call ourselves followers of Jesus? In other words, not only is it a practice, but it is a process. Discipleship is a process. In 2020, before COVID became a thing, I remember everyone was coming up with their New Year's resolutions. And I'm not a big New Year's resolutions guy. I kind of think we overestimate what we can do in a year and underestimate what we can do in a decade. And so I just said, you know what, I'm not going to do it. Maybe it's because I'm just afraid that I'm going to fail in my New Year's resolutions. But for whatever reason, I looked back and I said, you know what have I done in the last 10 years? Where have I seen God do something in me? And there was one area I felt like I was slightly more patient in 2020 than I was in 2010. One place, one small area of progress. It's a slow process. And yet, I thought, if I can do that every 10 years, God really can begin to do a pretty amazing work in me over my lifetime. And in fact, that's what it is. Apprenticeship of Jesus. It's this forever pursuit. My dad was a pastor for 40 years, and right before he retired, being in ministry, you kind of feel like you're holding on to God with like white knuckles the entire time. It's just a journey. It's turbulent. It's a roller coaster. And I remember him saying, I can't wait to be done with that kind of faith. Not done with faith, but like that. And his first year of retirement was the most faith-stretching, faith-building that he had ever had. Because it's this forever process. It never stops. Let's take a look at another letter Paul wrote to the church in Rome. And they were struggling with the same things that I think we struggle with so often. We forget what our values are. We forget that we're apprentices of Jesus. He challenges them. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Those words, transformation, change, it's indicating a process, a cycle. Going back to that fruit metaphor, think about your favorite fruit or vegetable. For the Larsons, we love tomatoes in the summertime. And my father-in-law has planted a couple kind of out behind the garage. And every few days, especially towards the end of the summer, he'll come over and he'll ask the kids, hey, do you guys want to come over and pick tomatoes? And they'll all walk over and none of the tomatoes make it back because they're just popping them in their mouths as they walk back to the house. But even my kids understand that it's a cycle. Those tomatoes, they begin as a seed or a seedling, and then you got to tend it and water it and watch it and make sure the bunnies don't eat it. And then even when there's fruit, the fruit doesn't just appear overnight. It starts small, and then it grows. And there's a ton of that growth language in Scripture. This passage in John is from the Message. Jesus is talking here, and he says, I am the real vine, and my Father is the farmer. He cuts off every branch of me. I missed that, sorry. Every branch of me that doesn't bear grapes. And every branch that is grape-bearing, he prunes back so it will bear even more. I am the vine, you are the branches. When you're joined with me and I with you, the relation intimate and organic. The harvest is sure to be abundant. Separated, you can't produce a thing. We see this natural process of bearing fruit here. Connected to Christ, as apprentices, we begin to grow. And eventually we're capable of an abundant harvest. Now, I don't know if you caught it there. I kind of read fast over one particular idea and word. I didn't really want to talk about it. Skipped over this word, this idea of pruning. Because pruning in our lives, in discipleship, it's painful. Years ago, I took a visit to a vineyard in Los Olivos, California. It's in Santa Barbara County, this beautiful, beautiful vineyard. Actually, he was neighbors with like the Wrigley family and the owner of this basketball team and this football team. It was crazy, like right in the center. And his house was on the top of the vineyard, and the vineyard kind of came down in this beautiful valley. And he walked me to one particular row of vines that really were just kind of thick and grisly and gnarly. And he described this spot as being the toughest place in the entire vineyard to grow. The ground was the hardest. It got the hottest sun, received the least amount of water. And then as he's describing this, he's cutting back the flimsy parts of the vine. I'm like, you just told me how hard this guy's life is. Give it a break. Take it easy. But he needed to do that so that the healthy branches could thrive. That vine had a hard life, but The necessary act of the farmer was to trim it back. The necessary act of our Father is to do the same in our lives. Apprenticing under Jesus, it's tough. It's tough to look the way Christ looked because we aren't him. Paul describes this struggle. I think we can all relate to these words. For if I know the law but still can't keep it, and if the power of sin within me keeps sabotaging my best intentions, I obviously need help. I realize that I don't have what it takes. I can will it, but I can't do it. I decide to do good, but I don't really do it. I decide not to do bad, but then I do it anyway. My decisions, such as they are, don't result in actions. Something has gone wrong deep within me. It gets the better of me every time. I've tried everything, and nothing helps. I'm at the end of my rope. Is there no one who can do anything for me? Isn't that the real question? The answer, thank God, is that Jesus Christ can and does. Paul's like the second best Christian ever, right? I mean, I guess after Christ. Maybe he's the first best Christian ever. He wrote tons of the New Testament, and this is how he struggles with sin. He's at the end of his rope. He can't even do good without sin being right there around the corner. Being a disciple, it's painful. Listen to Jesus. He puts it a little bit more kind of meat on the bones here in Luke. He says to this crowd, right? He's preaching to the crowd. This is not the right thing to get a crowd to follow you. He says, then said to the crowd, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross daily, and follow me. You know what we haven't liked since the moment that we were born? Not getting our way. And here, Jesus is saying, if you're my apprentice, do three things. Give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. And before the easiest one, follow me, feels easy. But those first two, give up your own way and take up your cross. That one can get lost on us, the idea of taking up our own cross. We're disconnected with this idea of being crucified in today's day and age. We're insulated from that. But the level of violence in this, it's unthinkable. This is the most terrible death for the worst crimes and criminals. And how often are we called to walk this path every single day? What do you do daily? Think about it. You eat, maybe you drink coffee, you drive to work or school or to the gym. There are things that we do every single day. And what do we call them? We call them habits. Daily, as out of a learned habit, we are to give up our own way and die to the things that we want. So why are we as Christians, as disciples, as apprentices, why are we planning for anything less than that? We are told that this is the way it's going to be. Jesus didn't hide the extent of the difficulty that we were to endure on this journey. It'll lead to the death of the things of our former selves. Romans 12 provides some clarity. He says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you, give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him, a sacrifice. It's another kind of concept that we've lost the true and real meaning, because in a sacrifice, there's something baked into that definition, right? Something has to die. And Paul says that's what God will find acceptable. Going back to that vineyard in Los Olivos, California, those vines that he trimmed, where they received the harshest conditions. It was a row of Syrah grapes. And they produced the most incredible, rich, and flavorful wine on that entire vineyard. There was pain in the process, but there was a purpose. And following Jesus will be that way. It will be painful, but it is full of purpose. John 10, Jesus says these words, my purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life. It's not one without the other. It's pain and purpose. For us, his apprentices, his disciples, he's got this purpose for us as we allow him to lead. Our lives will be rich and satisfying. He's saying, die to the things that you want, not because I like to see you hurting or in pain, but because those are the things truly that cause the most pain in your lives. Instead, I want you to be free from them and do purposeful work in my kingdom. If there's something that we as humans are desperate for, it's purpose, to have an impact in this world. And as disciples, we find it. That purpose, it looks like a painful dying of parts of us, the preferences that we have. And it's proven by the way that we love. Listen to Jesus' words here. So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. I wonder if the reason that so many people today are deconstructing faith or ignoring it entirely is because they don't see that kind of love from us. I wonder if we, like the world, love by our own terms instead of like Jesus, this painful but eternally purposeful kind of love. I read this convicting passage in a recent email that I received from a pastor in New York. And it's a little bit long, so bear with me, but I'm going to read it. It's really, I think it just hits on everything that we talked about today. Most of the love shown by the church today is no different from the love of sinners. We are tribal, petty, vindictive, and prone to retaliate. We look more like politicians attacking opponents than suffering servants. Too often the love of the church has looked like the love of the world. But Jesus tells us that to be sons of the Most High, we must have love that is labor and fortitude. Love that is patient, not immediate, hidden, not applauded, permanent, not temporary. And this is because of how we have been loved. Our Father is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. He's merciful to those who did not deserve it. It's this kind of love of labor and fortitude that we are called to today. This kind of love is overlooked, taken for granted, easily trampled underfoot. But it's the same kind of love that can turn an enemy into a friend, bring a prodigal home, and redeem the world. It's the love of Jesus manifest through our lives. To love well is to suffer without recognition and often without response. It's the way of the cross, but the way of life. To love is the way of the cross and the way of life. I can't do it on my own. You can't do it on your own. But listen to Jesus. He says, yes, I am the vine. You are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. And that's how we do it. That's the only way we can do it, is remaining in him, resting in his presence, settling into him. Eugene Peterson says, making a home in his presence. And that's what the world needs. When we take everything apart, we deconstruct it, all we have left is the love of Jesus. That's the peace that remains. And loving like that, doing as he did, it is painful and it's purposeful and can only come from Christ himself. Over the next couple of minutes, we're going to have just a time for you to respond to God. In a few minutes, the band is going to come and lead us. But before they do, we should have an opportunity. There are stations throughout the auditorium and just ways for you to really just listen to what God is saying, how he's pressing into your heart. Feel free to partake of communion at those stations or light a candle as a prayer or kind of a memorial to God. Jot down the thing that's heavy on your heart and tack it to the cross. However you choose to spend this time, we just ask that you would listen to God. If something is heavy on your heart, we're going to have prayer partners. They would love to pray with you and pray through whatever it is that you're going through. And I'm just going to pray for us. Would you pray with me? God, we are so incredibly grateful for the love, the amazing, incredible love that you have for us. We only get maybe a sliver of that. We can't understand it. We never will until we see you face to face. But God, I pray that we are overwhelmed even now by the sliver of you that we are experiencing. I pray that we would listen to how you are speaking to us now, the way that you're knocking on on the door of our heart. And we understand that following you can be painful, but we understand that you are with us in that process, giving us incredible purpose. So if someone out there is just lost in this, feeling way more pain than purpose, I pray that you would bring them peace and strength in this moment. Maybe somebody, it's been a long time since they've sensed you at all. I pray that you would speak loudly and clearly to them. We're so grateful for you. We love you. We are thankful for the love that you have for us. In your name, amen.